Hello, I'm Stephen from Autonight, and today, weather permitting, I'm going to be replacing both steering track rods, tie rods, on the BMW Z3. In the next phase of my rusty component replacement plan, today I turn my attention to these rather crusty steering track rods. And here we have the replacement parts. I've got two steering track rods, or tie rods, depending on the terminology you wish to use, from Lemforder. These come complete with the nut for the track rod end, where it passes through the hub carrier. And from Febi Bilstein, I have two steering rack boot kits. You've got the boot, you've got the two clips, and for some reason a very large quantity of grease with each one. This nut is a 16mm. Not stupidly tight. Sometimes you can just give this hub carrier a clout with a hammer and it'll break free. Other times you may need to use a ball joint splitter. Ball joint splitter it is. It's released. Cut that clip off. And the inner one. We can then pull this off, get this right out of the way. And now we can see this inner joint. Over time these do become very floppy. I mean, there's no play in this. Some people say, oh, if there's any movement and you can drop it like that, then it's worn out. Well, they go like that quite quickly. When they're new, if I let go of this, it would stay steady. I need a 32mm spanner. It is off. And here is the crusty little devil without the gaiter on it. Here's the old and new track rods. Here's the Lemforder part number. And something that's important to do is to set the correct length of this. Now, we're never going to get it absolutely perfect, and there will need to be a tracking check, wheel alignment check once this job's complete, but I want to get it as close as possible. Some people count the threads and then do the same on the new one. It's a good start. But if they're different brands, the threads may start in a different place. So it's never something you can completely rely on as technique. So I've got like a hybrid way of doing this. So I did initially count the threads. There were 10 on this one, and I set it to that. But then I realized quite quickly that they have actually been made quite differently. The threads don't necessarily start in the same place. And the only real way to estimate these is to measure between here and the center of here. Now, even that's not an exact science, because I can't be sure that both of these ball joint centers are perfectly vertical. So it is an approximation. It will need a tracking check, but I'll do the best I can to get these the same. And this one is the same. So we tighten this lock nut, which is a 22mm. Just lightly, quick remeasure. This is ready to be fitted. If you saw my recent shorts video, you may recall that I mentioned this crow's foot tool, which enables me to tighten this to the correct torque setting. I was slightly concerned that this would not actually pass over the steering rack. And my concern was real, so I need to just shave a little bit off of this with a grinder. It seems a bit of a shame to have to butcher what is actually quite a nice thing, but it was only 15 quid off Amazon, so I can always get another one if I get too precious about what I've done to it. But to be fair, it's probably more useful in the way it's going to be modified, if I ever have to do these again on a similar car. And after a little minor modification, grinding down that surface there, it's now a viable tool for this job. I do like to apply just a little bit of Loctite on these due to the nature of the component. Some people do, some people don't, but it is steering after all, so I'm happier with it there. Spin this on, and that's now fully tightened by hand. It's good to note that behind the steering rack boot there was no power steering fluid. If when you remove a power steering boot fluid runs out, it means that the seals have failed in the rack, so this is a good sign. And then using the crow's foot on there, I can torque that up to 72 Newton meters. This comes with a little bit of grease here. I'm just going to add a little bit more. I think it's molybdenum disulfide, but I'm going to add just a little bit more from the pouch of grease that we get with the rack boots. Here is the Febi Bilstein part number for the boot, Bellows set as it calls it. They're not handed. There will be some people that say, oh, why didn't you get that on first? Well, you can, but I prefer to get this on afterwards, as if you get that on first it can get in the way of tightening up the inner track rod ball joint to the rack. This simply locates into this, around this little rubber bung that's already there, like that. Pop the clip round there. It's easier to get this into position and to secure this inner clip when the steering is not turned on a full lock this way, so I'll turn it back very shortly and we'll take care of this. Meantime, we need to get this back in here. The replacement nut on these is actually a 17mm, and if the centre of the ball joint is to spin, when you retighten it you can use a 5mm Allen key to secure it, hold it in place. This doesn't seem to be spinning, but now it is. And once that's moderately tight, we torque this to 45 Newton meters. I use something non-metallic to help ease this over. Certainly nothing that can puncture it. I'm just going to use a mirror to make sure that it's okay. Further up behind here, I always keep an old mirror glass for such purposes, and I can see that's all on correctly, and that is tightened nicely using these. And last of all, using a 13mm to secure this inner track rod and a 22 to tighten this lock nut, we just make sure that this is all tight. And that concludes the fitting of the near side track rod, end and gaiter. Now for the other side. Round to the other side, the offside, right hand side. This is even more scabby. Usually it's the curb side that's worse because you get all the muck kicked up from the gutter, but on this car it seems to be the other way around, which is weird. So no matter how many times I do these, they always make me jump when they go. Nice and dry in there as well, really good to see. As I said earlier, it's very upsetting when you pull these gaiters off and fluid runs out because you know you need a new steering rack. And for anyone who's curious, on this side you can actually see the serrations here. So a rack and pinion steering, for anyone who doesn't know, has this, which is the rack, and a pinion which engages with it. The pinion's in this piece here. So because it's right hand drive, obviously it's over this side of the car, the pinion, and then the rack that it engages with. The crow's foot tool that I modified for the other side would probably actually have fitted over this, so it might not have been an issue if I was just doing this side, but it's modified now anyway. I have set the length of this one via the same process, if we can call it a process, it's so approximate, and I've put a little bit of Loctite on there as well, just for peace of mind. And we wind that one in there, as you do. And it's tightened to 72 Newton meters. And as with the other side, I'm just going to add a little bit more grease just to give it a good start to its life. It is molybdenum disulfide. I remember those from the periodic table at school. That was a long time ago now. Tighten this 17 until it starts to spin, if it spins, which it is. Revert to old school method. Again, just using something wooden that isn't going to harm the gaiter to try and get it over, which is done. And once again, just check it behind with the mirror to make sure it's on evenly, and it isn't quite. But it is now. And we just ensure this is tight with the 13mm to hold the inner track rod, and the 22 for the lock nut. Torque setting's very low for that actually, it's about 15 Newton meters. Sounds too low. But all it has to really do is to tighten against this collar, which closes this area here, this sort of split area. The job is done. I seem to be building up quite a collection of old suspension and steering components on this car. It's back in the garage, safe and dry. And somehow I managed to avoid the rains. They are definitely on the way. So that's it for this one. I'll see you again in another video very soon. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.